You overlooked one little detail, didn't you, partner? What? Face it, genius, you've been played.
Howdy there, friends, family, adversaries, ladies, gentlemen, and non-binary folks. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Riley Constantine, and today we are talking about linearity in open-world video games, and more specifically, how open-world video games like Ghost of Tsushima have become so damn formulaic. Sounds exciting! There's nothing else I have to add to this preamble, so with that, on to the video. Ghost of Tsushima is not very good. While I gave the Sucker Punch open world samurai action game a lukewarm recommendation in my impressions video a couple weeks ago, my opinion of the game has only decreased in stature since I put out that video. Even though I firmly believe that Ghost of Tsushima still contains a fun combat system and a glorious visual art style, I still have not even touched this PS4 exclusive since I last talked about the game. And my rationale for neglecting Ghost of Tsushima, like the pasta stain on my t-shirt, is that I just was not having fun with it. In fact, I find the prospect of booting up and going back to the title exhausting. In many respects, it is a lifeless game and a total chore to play, and the game contains numerous flaws that devalue the experience. For example, the story is duller than a 1,000-year-old butter knife, the stealth and investigation mechanics are mundanely average, and the characters are overwhelmingly grim and one-note. However, these are just symptoms to a larger problem. Ghost of Tsushima's most egregious problem is that it is yet another open-world title filled with hours upon hours of busy work in a medium that is oversaturated with open-world games filled with hours upon hours of busy work. Ghost of Tsushima is stock full of unmemorable, recycled content. Bandit camps, stealth missions, a cavalcade of frivolous activities that upgrade your character, whatever. Like a bad version of Groundhog Day, you have to keep doing the same shit over and over again, just repeating the same damn objectives, and it gets old fast to the point that the very notion of going back to this interactive world makes me want to cuddle under my blanket in the fetal position like a baby. Don't get me wrong, I would have a fine enough time if you pointed a gun at me and forced me to play Ghost of Tsushima, but the thing is, I don't want to. While I had some fun with the combat and the visual art style is gorgeous, I already had my fill of this bland open world even before I completed the bloated never-ending first act. When I last played, there was still so many quests left to do, so many sights to see, so many things that I just do not care about. Do you see this? This is the basket where I store all my fucks that I give about Ghost of Tsushima. And as you can see, I got none to give. Ghost of Tsushima is a dry experience akin to a wheat bread sandwich lacking mayonnaise, or Lord of the Rings, which, to be fair, also needs mayonnaise. And a big reason as to why Ghost of Tsushima is just so damn boring at times is that it has a non-linear open-world game design. For those of you new here, linearity is the most vilified part of game design aside from potential female protagonists in Ubisoft games. Whether by developers, publishers, the press, or players themselves, people have criticized linear video games because they feature heavily structured single-player campaigns that, in theory, lack the freedom of open-world experiences. According to this line of thinking, open-world games allow the player to accomplish objectives how they desire within a huge sandbox map containing 80 to 100, if not more hours worth of video game bang for your buck and content. In these open-world titles, there are loads of bandit camps to liberate and watchtowers to climb, and with all of these similar and numerous quests, you receive hours upon hours of content that in theory gives open world games more value than a shorter linear title. Never mind that some of the best games of all time, hell even in the last 15 years alone, are tightly structured narrative driven games with nay a watchtower to climb or a bandit camp to clear. AAA video game publishers like Electronic Arts and Ubisoft want little to do with linear titles like The Last of Us or Uncharted. We have seen time and time again that many big-name companies, and those who accept their propagandic marketing pitches, claim that linear games are not popular. When Electronic Arts shut down Dead Space developer Visceral Games a few years ago, an Electronic Arts executive claimed that people do not like linear games anymore, which, judging by the sales success of The Last of Us Part 2, lol. For Furthermore, Assassin's Creed publisher Ubisoft echoed the sentiments expressed by Electronic Arts. For over a decade, Ubisoft's higher-ups heavily favored big open-world non-linear titles rather than games with a more linear structure, which is why so many Ubisoft games are massive open worlds with minimal linearity. Judging by the output of Electronic Arts, Ubisoft, and many other studios, the AAA video game industry as a whole seems to agree with EA's and Ubisoft's assessment. This is all in spite of the sales success of single-player titles like Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order and The Last of Us Part 2 that prove that there is still a market for non-open world single-player titles. Yet gaming publishers, and once again those who gobble up the shit that's spoon-fed to them by their marketing departments, all too often ignore this truth. To them, non-linear open world games like Assassin's Creed or Far Cry are in theory better because they have big open worlds with a large abundance of content that never fucking ends. In theory, and I realize I'm saying in theory a lot because it really is in theory, who wants just a mere 15 to 30 hours of memorable quality game design when you can, in theory, have the value of 80 to 100 hours of vanilla busy work where you repeat the same objectives over and over again, having an okay average time, but remembering, oh, so very little of it. Oh, hello, Ghost of Tsushima, my old friend. Have you come to bore me again? As you can tell, I prefer linear games to open world ones. No shocker there.
In theory.
Open world non-linear games like Ghost of Tsushima, or let's be honest here, almost any Ubisoft game, are supposed to be about granting the player the freedom to explore the story and world with as few limitations as possible while rewarding player creativity. Yet with so many of these open world games, they clearly do have limitations, and judging by how identical many of them are, they lack creativity too.
Hey! Jackass, you're ruining the show here.
However, before we dive further into Ghost of Tsushima, let's talk a little bit about the Ubisoft open world games, because they are the biggest offender here, clearly, and games like Ghost of Tsushima are clearly copying that Ubisoft style that they've kind of made their own. Unfortunately. Over the last decade and a half, Ubisoft alone has released open-world games in the form of 11 Assassin's Creed titles, 4 Far Cry games, and 2 Watch Dogs titles, and this is to say nothing of games in development from each of these franchises, as well as the bastardization of Beyond Good and Evil. While there are some variations between each singular installment in these games, any of their uniquities aren't enough to differentiate these titles from each other in any meaningful way. Sure, a game like Assassin's Creed Black Flag features a pirate ship, but there is not a single moment of that game that I remember in terms of action set pieces, story beats, or level design. Despite having 80 to 100 hours of fine enough content, all I remember about that game was that I had a pirate ship, and that's it, really. Black Flag, despite some of its strengths, i.e. it has a motherfucking pirate ship, just isn't enough to really differentiate itself from the other Assassin's Creed games, save for it has a motherfucking pirate ship. On the whole, the game is unmemorable, and this is like the polar opposite to a shorter, linear game like, say, Uncharted 2, a game that you can easily reminisce over a lot because there's so many more memorable moments in it. Like in Uncharted 2, I remember the great train action set piece, or the collapsing building, or when there's a tank chasing you. All these moments are memorable as hell and contain gameplay and story moments that have stuck with me for over 10 years. Whenever I look back at Uncharted 2, there is history between me and the game. I have lots of feelings about it. I fuck it on Sundays. And when judging Uncharted 2 next to a non-linear game like Assassin's Creed Black Flag, there is no comparison. Uncharted 2 and other high-caliber linear games like it are superior. Where Uncharted 2 had many memorable moments drilled into my psyche, Assassin's Creed Black Flag contains little in the way of big, noteworthy moments in terms of level design, story, or eye-catching action set pieces, and that is because Assassin's Creed Black Flag, and to be honest, every Assassin's Creed game for that matter, is bogged down in an overly large, monotonous, soulless, non-linear open world stocked full of busy work, filler, repetitive mission structures, filler, and a forgettable story. Assassin's Creed Black Flag and other non-linear open world games like it are basically oatmeal without cinnamon, and why would you do that to yourself? Old man Quaker Oats is rightfully judging you. And let's be clear here, Assassin's Creed Black Flag is considered to be one of the best versions of Assassin's Creed. Because, it has a motherfucking pirate ship, and gamers are starved for a good AAA pirate game, which there aren't really that many at all. But even with a pirate ship, it still isn't that good. It's a solid but very unmemorable experience. To make matters worse, so many of these Ubisoft games share more than just a big soulless open world. In fact, Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, and Watch Dogs may have all their own uniquities, yet the gameplay styles of all three games can be described as stealth action. And for those of you that have been playing video games for more than 10 years, then you know that stealth action titles have permeated the AAA space. So many big budget games these days that are not Battle Royale or a live service are stealth action experiences. Hell, even linear games like Uncharted 4 and the Last of Us series are stealth action. However, most of these stealth action titles in the AAA space are Ubisoft-style open-world experiences, where single-player stealth action games are usually better paced, contain great memorable action set pieces, and strong narrative hooks. Ubisoft-style open worlds like Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, and its ilk are jam-packed with monotonous busy work that undermines the stronger aspects of those games. To sum up, these vast, empty open worlds generally lack the same personality as a more focused, smaller, linear title.
Jesus, you stink.
At this point, I know what you're thinking. And you should stop that because children are watching. What do Ubisoft open world games have to do with Ghost of Tsushima? Well, to answer, the drab Ubisoft-style non-linear open world formula has migrated its way over to games by other companies, most notably many PlayStation exclusives published by Sony, and these titles have been done to varying degrees of success. While some titles like Horizon Zero Dawn and Marvel's Spider-Man have their own identity and an interesting take to the normal ho-hum Ubisoft open world style game, some of these titles have misfired, most notably Ghost of Tsushima, which can be a snooze fest on par with writing It's a Small World pre-COVID. Yeah, It's a Small World is such a bad ride that the threat of the coronavirus actually makes it more enjoyable. Admittedly, as I've stated before, Ghost of Tsushima does have some redeemable characteristics, such as the terrific combat system and a stunning visual art style, yet these positive attributes do not change the fact that Ghost of Tsushima's open world feels soulless and lacks defining features from all the other soulless open world games that also lack defining features. It is yet another stealth action title filled with Ubisoft-style busywork, forgettable story beats, hours upon hours of vanilla content, filler, and little in the way of noteworthy action set pieces. Unlike Horizon Zero Dawn or Marvel's Spider-Man, Ghost of Tsushima just doesn't have that zest, that it factor that makes it stand on its own merits. Ironically, Ghost of Tsushima would be a stronger game if it were linear. Being a more straightforward, narrative-based video game experience would allow the title to really highlight its strengths. Sure, Ghost of Tsushima as it is already has stellar combat and a borderline
ORGASMIC
beautiful art style, but a smaller scale game would have highlighted these attributes to be the true focal points they deserve to be, more so than the bland open world that they currently get watered down in. In a linear game, Sucker Punch could have designed action set pieces around the combat to give the action more focus, and use the art style in ways that complement the themes of the narrative, which in turn could have made the story more impactful and pace out the gameplay more effectively. Hell, the game could even still have some openish elements in its linear world, like how last year's thoroughly enjoyable Gears 5 did. Furthermore, a linear and shorter Ghost of Tsushima could have paced the action out accordingly, and would have allowed Sucker Punch to improve both the story and the gameplay by making sure the action is engaging and the narrative emotionally lands where it is supposed to. And let's be clear, that last point about the narrative is especially important. To be honest, narratives in linear games are generally far more memorable than open world ones. While there are some exceptions, I remember so little of overly long open world games like Ghost of Tsushima when compared to linear games like The Last of Us or Titanfall 2. Sure, these linear campaigns have far smaller run times compared to their open world peers, but linear games generally pack way more noteworthy content per hour than the average open world game does in 10 or even 20 20 hours. Linear games are generally smaller in scale, and as a result, the developers can focus their time sharpening the more important elements in their projects. Where a large open world game sees a huge swath of the development team spending lengthy stretches of time on the broader elements of a game's development, a linear non-open world title allows a studio to laser in on the most critical aspects of their game, such as the action, the story, and the pacing, and ensures that they pack in highly memorable and engaging content in their games. This makes linear experiences more valuable. Sure, if you measure value by the amount of hours you can spend on a game, then an open world experience will, in theory, be more valuable. But if you value how those hours are spent and the quality of time you have spent with the game, linear games offer a far greater value because the developers are delivering a highly focused and constructed experience packed with memorable moments meant to keep you playing until the end credits roll. Between this or an empty open world that is average in almost every way, see Ghost of Tsushima, it does not matter that that open world game is between 80 and 100 hours. I will take the 15 to 30 hour campaign every single time because the time spent there is more valuable and memorable. Allow me to use a recent example in The Last of Us Part 2. The Last of Us Part 2 was a linear story-driven game that garnered a whole range of passionate responses. It is a controversial game to say the least for many reasons that I'm not going to get into because of spoilers, and to be fair, I have covered it extensively before, but whether you loved it or hated it, The Last of Us Part 2 is undeniably a very memorable experience, and I doubt that even its most staunchest detractors would disagree with that. It's not a game that people will be forgetting anytime soon, unlike, say, Ghost of Tsushima. Ghost of Tsushima is an unfortunate casualty of the vanilla open world bug that is plaguing the AAA space. Despite a quality combat system and jaw-dropping visuals, the few great parts of the game are drowning in a sea of mediocrity, a sludge that is so similar to so many of its peers. Open world games are supposed to be about freedom to traverse the map how you will, and freedom to accomplish objectives in a way that fits your playstyle. But ironically, these open world games, the ones lacking in strong narrative structure and memorable action set pieces, are clearly far more limited than linear games despite their bigger size and scope. Ghost of Tsushima is identical to so many games that have come out in the last 15 years, containing the same bland open world and game design. And if open world games were really supposed to be about freedom, they wouldn't feel so dull and creatively restrictive. Please, video game industry, vary your shit up. And that's all I'll say about Ghost of Tsushima. It's boring, and can't wait to not talk about this game again. Oh, motherfuck! And with that, I'd just like to thank my patrons, especially my high tier ones in Slasher Vales, Mom, Miles Nelson, and David Devlin. Thank you so much for supporting what I do. Love y'all.